This is the Advocacy webinar, and we have a special guest, past ambassadors that can share their experience throughout the program and how they use the skills they gain and how, did activities around fundraising.
So I have Stephanie Raza here. Raza.
She's a former 2019 and 2020 ambassador and is a dynamic figure in her community. She found out about the World Literacy Foundation through a Facebook ad and fell in love with her mission because she was always passionate about education and literacy as a child. Growing up, she always spent her weekends in libraries and taught herself 5 languages.
Currently getting her bachelor's at NYU.
I can add that I wrote to Stephanie to ask her if she wanted to be involved. And it was the perfect timing because she was thinking about the World Literacy Foundation. So I thought, okay, this is special because if she wanted to know how she could help us, she wanted to still be involved with us. Like I said, she's been part of the ambassador group since 2019. So she has experienced a lot of things all these years, and for sure she can share more about what she's been up to and how she has used the skills and how she did advocacy while being on the youth ambassador program and what her experience was. So without further ado, Stephanie, all yours.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I couldn't have said it better myself. So it's really nice to meet all of you. I hope you guys will be able to stay the entire time because I'll be dropping a lot of words of wisdom.
Leadership and advocacy. So yeah, I was born and raised in Queens, New York City. And if you guys know anything about New York, it's honestly like a cultural capital of the world. I would highly recommend you guys to pay a visit if you can one day. I am the oldest daughter of my family, and we're first generation. So my parents were immigrants and they moved here. And I do speak 5 languages. I just like to constantly stay learning. And I know a lot of people have questions like, why do you know so many languages, or how do you learn? Why? Like I said, I really love learning. And how is once you learn the second or third language, it just gets so much easier. It was kind of funny. I saw it on an ad on Facebook, but something really compelled me to this organization, and I love the mission, which is to change lives through literacy because it's so global. But the reason why I joined, across the different races and cultures, there's a huge imbalance between how often each demographic reads. So you see at the age of 9, it's pretty equal across the board, right? Most kids, when they're 9 years old, they're reading in school or their parents are reading to them during bedtime. And somewhere along the way, when they reach the age of adolescence, we start to see a huge difference in the numbers, right? And that's due to different reasons, a lot of unfortunate systematic, problems in my country. Growing up in school, I would see some of the smartest kids, but they would hold themselves back because they already had a mindset that I'm not enough, or I'm not going to be anything, or I'm destined for failure because I come from so and so back. The thing that I loved about World Literacy Foundation is it's like one of the only programs where you can join as a teenager. A lot of programs, you have to be 18 to join. There's such a huge potential in young people, and we're totally missing out. I'm not sure the ages of the people who are present today, but if any of you guys are still teenagers, I think you're doing such an amazing job. Even if you have no idea what you're going to do by the end of October, I think the fact that you applied and got into this program is a huge accomplishment by itself. So yeah, that's why I joined, because I wanted to make a change, while I was still young, and just step in and, take the leap of faith. So most anthropologists define culture as a shared set of implicit and explicit values, ideas, concepts, and rules of behavior. Culture is really important, I think, for World Literacy Foundation.
I remember in 2019, when I was an ambassador, we were raising money for the students in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, the solar-powered tablets. And then in 2020, we were focusing on the Colombian students.
Even though I had never been to Africa, I'd never been to Colombia, I didn't know what the solar-powered tablets program was. I realized the core values was that I like reading, and these students in Africa and Colombia, they also love reading and they also love learning. the only thing holding them back is maybe the money or, their family situation.
Took this definition from Merriam-Webster. So they define advocacy as the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. So usually most people hear the word advocacy like in a legal context, like when we're talking about a lawyer or, something related to the Justice Department.
Nowadays in 2022, the reason why there's so many problems, in like, the social political sense is because people, they do support a cause, but something's they don't know why they support it, or they just can't empathize with it. There needs to be a certain reason why you want to be an ambassador, because there's so many other ways to be an advocate. You can be an advocate for, cancer patients.
Advocate for animals, and you volunteer at the dog shelter, right? So make sure you really find out your culture, and it's always a continuous effort, and you have to keep growing on it.
In 2019 and 2020, I'm not sure if this year's ambassadors are still focusing on the same programs, but I'm sure whatever you guys are doing is probably just as amazing. I still keep in touch with a lot of the ambassadors, which is really great. We still talk on like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, but I was much younger. I was like 15 or 16, and they were already in college. And I felt a little intimidated because they all knew what they were doing. They were like, okay, I'm going to do A, B, C. I'm going to raise X amount of money. I'm going to do, this, and that. And I had no idea. I had no idea how me, this teenager from New York is going to do something to impact children all the way in Africa, right? So what I thought is maybe try to make it more local. I know I'm really good at talking. I know I'm really good at convincing people. A project to basically collect books, like secondhand books, and redistribute them amongst like the homeless communities in my area. So I know like my work didn't necessarily directly impact the students in Africa, but the reason why I decided that this was important to do anyways is because I needed to find a way to make something happen. And I would have never done that program to donate books to homeless students if I didn't have this big goal that I need to help these kids in Africa. I believe after that, I did end up doing another fundraiser where I did raise money. There's lots of different ways to help out. I had a couple other fellow ambassador friends who were from like India and Bangladesh, and they taught like literacy classes in their own like campuses. So there's like so many different ways. So please don't limit yourself to like, I have to sell cookies and raise money for, so and so. There's so many options. Like, I'm just one person. There's 300 ambassadors. Like, what difference can I make? But it really makes a huge difference, and it opens up so many doors. So for me specifically, in 2019, I did the books for the homeless youth. And eventually the year after, I started working at Sparks Within Reach. So Sparks Within Reach is also a nonprofit. So similar to World Literacy, they also dedicate their mission to improving literacy. We educate people during COVID-19. So we raised awareness about different health issues during the pandemic, and we got people to donate their blood and their plasma. And we actually used the plasma to develop research on the vaccines. So that was obviously really, really helpful. They come from various backgrounds. A lot of them have problems speaking English, they're really passionate about their careers, but the one thing holding them back is like when they're sitting in class, they feel like compared to kids who grew up in New York, they feel a little shy or intimidated because maybe they can't read as quickly, they can't understand the lecture materials. So I decided to help people like these. So I basically coached them, and I helped them with their English. I helped them speak in a more like professional way for like interviews and job opportunities. I work for the Malika Collective. So right now we're basically a startup. We're trying to open up like a like an incubator for people of color in New York City. I really, really, really aligned with WLF And I kept in touch with the coordinators at the time, and I actually wanted to create like a club at campus, like a college club. All right, so I wanted to share like 6 tips for how to be like a good leader, how to be a good advocate. So the first thing is empathy. Like earlier I mentioned like culture and advocacy, right? So advocacy means to support a cause, right? Maybe you support veganism, maybe you support climate change, both empathizing with like the people we're affecting, right? And then also empathizing with people that you're trying to recruit. My second piece of advice is to really focus on the progress instead of goals. And honestly, like I kind of hate the word goals. I didn't end up necessarily like raising a lot of money for those 2 programs in Colombia and Africa. But then looking back, I looked at the progress and I realized, wow, like through this program, I learned how to become a better like communicator, and I just met all these cool friends all over the world, and I helped out my community, right? No individual is same. So I know we live in a COVID world where we do a lot of communication over Facebook and email and Zoom. It's really easy to misinterpret things, right? 'Cause sometimes, like I'm talking to people over text or email, and I meant it one way and they took it the other way. So be really open-minded. Don't make assumptions about people. And another thing is branding and impression, appropriate like impression when you're talking to people. Just make sure you make them feel good, because people do remember you. Like even 3 years later, I still keep in touch with a couple former ambassadors. So people do keep you in mind. So just remember that. And like I feel like maybe that's also one of the reasons why I was reached out to give this presentation, because I'm guessing somewhere along the way I must have made a good impression on somebody, so they kept me in mind. I don't know, and maybe if you keep up the same energy, you can also come back and give a presentation. And number 6 would be to just be really bold and brave. Set your goals like almost like unreasonably high, like really, really, really high, so that like even if you miss those unrealistic goals, at least whatever you accomplish is still pretty dang good, This is a book called Your Erroneous Zones by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and this is a book called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I think you can find these in other languages too. It's not just in English, so feel free to check these out. Learning how to not be so negative about yourself and how to be more person approach and how to be more positive. And the second book talks a lot about like leadership. And if you guys end up reading them, let me know what you think. And so I wanted to talk about what I'm up to nowadays, right? Because I'm sure you guys are curious, like what I do, like what did a former ambassador end up doing? Organization Miss Immigrant. So we are a group of amazing ladies from different countries all over the world, and we all live in America now. We go out into the community and we do different activities to give back to the community. So here on the right, we recently went to the disability. Just want to let you guys know that like there are so many options, right? Like don't limit yourself. There's so many things to do. I know somebody mentioned like they're from Egypt, but like you never know, like your reach could, you can affect somebody on the other side of the world. You never know, like this experience, you might end working for World Literacy one day. You might end up working in the nonprofit field. So always keep your options open. It was really nice to meet all of you guys. Obviously, good luck. And here are some of my contact information if you want to stay in touch.
Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. I think it's so inspiring. I know I'm not an ambassador, I'm the coordinator, but I always feel so refreshed and like ignites my passion for literacy and education whenever I listen, especially young people that are that's why I like the Youth Ambassador program.
I kept in mind one of the things you said, it doesn't matter if you don't, if no one, cares about the cause, but at the same time, I think either way, if you're taking the program, if you're taking, a step and, doing advocacy or doing fundraising and doing both,
not only you're just raising awareness about a topic, someone might listen, but you also are going to do it for yourself and what you're going to learn. And since my previous job actually was in the nonprofit sector, I cannot stress enough how important is that a program like the Youth Ambassador Program. It gives you tools for the fundraising, which is so important for advocacy and for leadership. For example, I didn't know too much about advocacy when I started in the nonprofit sector. So this is a great tool, and I think you took advantage of it because you're still involved in it, and you continue doing. You continue involved in the nonprofit sector and impacting communities. And I'm reading Maria Orozco. She's saying, "I agree, it's so inspiring." I think your story is really inspiring, and this presentation with little steps that means a lot.
And that at the end of the day, create a huge impact. But I don't want to keep talking because I know there was a question that was left unanswered. So
to ask, isn't it to when you're an immigrant to know a lot of languages? Isn't this something that will hold you back from helping people?
That's actually interesting. Yeah, I like the way you put it. Well, I guess I'm not the immigrant. My parents were the immigrants, so I guess I have the privilege that I didn't have to like actively learn English, right? So because I was already speaking that when I was born. But yeah, like the other languages that I learned, I wouldn't say they hold me back. Maybe I think you're talking about like, I would say like the thing about the languages is like the more languages you know, like it's harder to be a master of each of those, right? So like you have to accept that like you're going to be kind of okay at each language, right? Right. So since I like speak like 5, I'm really good at like 2. And then for the other 3, I'm like, kind of fluent, kind of conversational. So maybe that will hold me back because like I can't be a master of all of those yet. And like sometimes I guess like there's certain languages that I use every day, like English, because I live in New York. So because I speak English so much, sometimes maybe I forget a little bit of the other languages, right? So I do have to actively like practice those other ones or study them. But I wouldn't say they hold me back. I think it's I think it's an amazing conversation starter, right? Because people are always like, oh, like what 5 languages do you know? And it also really opens people up because a lot of people, right, English is not their first language, right? So if they speak Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, whatever, they're more receptive to you, right? Like they treat you differently. They talk about their stories. Sometimes I meet people and, they're struggling to form a sentence with me and they feel so embarrassed. But then I'm like, no, you can speak in your native language, and they feel so comfortable. So I would say I don't let it hold myself back. But yeah, obviously sometimes maybe it's just like really hard because like sometimes you slowly start to forget words from certain languages if you're not practicing them enough. So that's why I would say like try to visit the country or visit a neighborhood where that language is spoken really often, just so you don't forget that or lose touch of it.
I have another question. I'm 16, so I kind of feel helpless sometimes because how do I influence people when I still lack skills that are needed for that?
I was the same age. I was 16 when I did the program. And at that time, I had the same exact mindset. I don't think you lack skills at all because you showed up to the webinar. You are the first person asking all the questions tonight. So obviously there is like a passion. Like you're probably really good at talking. You're probably really good at like opening up the floor and like talking to people. That's something you can use to your advantage. And now it's even better because we live in like a pandemic world, so everybody's on social media, everybody's online, so use that to your power. I'm guessing you're in like high school or college right now. That's a community you can tap into. If you have like a club on campus, if you have like any friends or teachers, right, like a literature teacher, like a history or English teacher who would feel really compelled. So, you can like reach out to your teacher and say like, hey, I've been working with world literacy for the last few months. I would love to send you a poster. Can you send it to the class, or can you maybe talk about it for 5 minutes, or, let me talk about it? and just that is like enough. And then, you know, with that, hopefully maybe other opportunities line up for you to like fundraise or something like that. But don't think of that as the goal right now. Like that's like some, like, don't, like, I would say like take baby steps, right? So like I mentioned, I think you're probably a really good speaker. You're probably really good at like opening up because you've been the one kind of asking a lot of questions so far. So don't say that you lack skills and ask a lot of questions. Yeah, don't stop asking questions.
Thank you for that exchange. I think it's interesting that you say that you lack the skills. The fact that you apply and the reason that you were accepted is because I was the one who went through all the applications. It's because I saw something that your potential, let's say, for be a change maker, and that's the reason why you go through these modules to get those skills.
Stephanie said, baby steps. Just try on that. I know that if you're part of this program, it's because you already have something that stands you out from the rest. So something they want to share about what they've been experienced through the program. Stephanie did the program twice. Although the program changes a little bit each year, like for example, this year we're offering 2 internships for the most outstanding ambassadors. So, and we add content and we remove content depending on the situation. We have done that for this year too. So, but take advantage of this opportunity and
brainstorm any questions. So I will put my contact information in the chat. If something comes up again, feel free to reach out.
I hear from different cultures, like you said on the presentation, 10 times harder because of the context they live in. So the reason why Stephanie was invited today is that I came across, I'm going to tell the story, I came across the emails that she exchanged with a coordinator back then about the club, about the college club. So I thought, this is interesting. What an interesting initiative. So that's why I decided that I wanted to contact Stephanie and see if she wanted to, get involved in the webinar. So what she said that maybe in the future, maybe now you think, okay, well, I did this and it's not enough or whatever. Maybe in the future, I'm going to contact you and say, hey, I've been taking what you've been doing. For example, today, one of our partners that is Amazing People Schools, and they provided content for the Advocacy and Leadership modules. They shared the story of one of the ambassadors. That's Lucien from San Nevis, if I'm not mistaken, who, has an interesting story, and they shared it in the social media. So we're keeping an eye on, all the ambassadors and thinking, okay, this person has an interesting story, and we probably are going to highlight it in the future. So ambassadors as well. So we are going to share your stories for sure. So I like what you said, that maybe, now you think that no one is listening to you, but maybe someone is paying attention. And that's what happened with Stephanie. I saw an email from 2019 or 2020, I don't know.
Exactly.
and then I said, this girl is interesting. I want to talk to her,
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't even know that. That's really cool. Yeah. See, like an email from 2 or 3 years ago. And like I didn't even end up like making the club happen, but like the fact that I reached out, like somebody noticed that and somebody kept that in mind for like 3 years. So just take the leap of faith. And and I know like I think Hums left us, unfortunately, but she was saying like, she's from Egypt. But I like, don't even think about like, I'm from Egypt, I'm from, wherever. Think of like, I live in my bedroom. Start from your bedroom, and then think of how can I affect people in my building? How can I affect people on my street? How can I affect people in my like neighborhood? So just the baby steps.
Yeah. And social media nowadays make things easier. And that's something we're trying to encourage, that post on social media. Probably there are people who don't know about the awful numbers around literacy. And if you share just, a quote or something that you want to share about this, reposting, creating your own content. And, in the meantime, you are raising awareness. You are doing advocacy. And you are impacting someone, because someone is going to read your post. And, it's going to think about it. Maybe it's going to scroll down after that, but, you share the message. this time with all of you, this webinar.
Absolutely.
It was so interesting to, but for sure it was even so inspiring to listen to you. No, and thank you most of all. Thank you all of you for joining. It is located, so I really appreciated that you are taking the time to be here because you can interact. But if you can and you listen to the record, you watch the record later, also is great, because that means you are involved in it. Anything else, Stephanie, before we go?
Not much. Just I really appreciate you guys showing up. That means a lot. It really does mean a lot. The fact that you showed up, like you don't know who I am, you didn't know what I was going to talk about today, but you guys stayed. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.